After 40, something strange starts happening to people with real wealth. They stop buying things everyone else is still chasing, not because they can't afford them, because they finally understand the hidden price attached to them, and that's the part nobody talks about. Most people think becoming wealthy means upgrading your lifestyle forever. Bigger house, newer car, more status, more rewards. But the people who actually stay rich for decades often do the opposite. They quietly eliminate certain expenses almost everyone else keeps defending emotionally. And once you notice these patterns, you can't unsee them. Because some purchases don't just drain your bank account. They drain your focus, your leverage, your future options. In fact, one of the habits on this list is so normalized that millions of middle-class people mistake it for success, while many wealthy people over 40 see it as a financial trap. So if you've ever wondered why some people seem to build lasting wealth while others stay stuck in an endless cycle of earning and spending, this video may completely change the way you look at money after 40. Maybe you've felt this already. Even if you never had the words for it, you work harder now than you did 10 years ago. You earn more than you used to, and yet somehow, the feeling of financial freedom still feels distant. Not because you're irresponsible, but because nobody teaches you that certain spending habits age badly. At 25, some expenses feel exciting. At 40, they quietly become anchors. And the hardest part is this: many of these purchases don't look dangerous on the surface. They actually look normal, successful, even. That's why people keep defending them, even while they're stressed, financially stretched, and wondering why their money disappears so fast. Deep down, you may already know there are things you spend money on that no longer bring real value. Things you keep paying for out of routine, pressure, image, or exhaustion. And wealthy people over 40 eventually realize something most people never do. Every dollar you spend is buying something beyond the object itself. It's buying a future, or delaying one. Psychologist and Nobel Prize winner Daniel Kahneman spent decades studying how people make financial decisions. He discovered that human beings are bad at recognizing the difference between what feels rewarding and what actually improves long-term well-being. In other words, many of the things people spend money on after 40 are not rational decisions. They're emotional patterns disguised as lifestyle choices, and that's dangerous. Because by this stage of life, your financial decisions compound faster than ever, not just financially, psychologically. Investor Charlie Munger once warned that people don't usually fail because they lack intelligence. They fail because they develop costly habits they refuse to question. After 40, most people are no longer building their lives consciously. They're repeating them automatically. Automatic subscriptions, automatic upgrades, automatic status spending, automatic financial stress. And according to author and risk analyst Nassim Nicholas Taleb, the biggest risks in life are often the ones people normalize so deeply. They stop seeing them at all, which means some of the expenses you're about to hear may look harmless at first, until you realize how much freedom they've actually been costing you for years. But here's the unsettling question almost nobody asks themselves after 40. What if some of the financial decisions you're most proud of are actually the ones keeping you stuck? Because wealthy people don't just think differently about earning money. They think differently about what deserves their money in the first place. And once you understand the invisible psychology behind the expenses they quietly eliminate, you start noticing patterns everywhere. Patterns in your friends, patterns in successful people, maybe even patterns in your own daily life that have been hiding in plain sight for years. The strange part, most people will never recognize these habits because society rewards them socially, even when they're damaging financially. Which means there's a very real chance that one of the next items will trigger an uncomfortable realization you weren't expecting. Not because it's extreme, but because it feels painfully normal. The first thing wealthy people stop spending money on after 40 is buying things to impress people they don't even respect. Because at some point, they realize status is one of the most expensive addictions in the world. Luxury upgrades, designer labels, constant lifestyle inflation. Not because they need them, but because they want to signal success. And ironically, many financially stressed people look rich, while many truly wealthy people look surprisingly ordinary. That's when the shift happens. Wealthy people over 40 begin asking a different question: does this purchase increase my freedom, or just my image? And once you start thinking that way, entire categories of spending begin to look different. Which leads directly into the second thing they quietly stop paying for. They stop overspending on appearances that create hidden maintenance costs. Not just financially, mentally, the bigger house that requires constant repairs. The luxury car that quietly drains attention and cash flow. The successful lifestyle that forces them to keep earning at the same exhausting pace. Because after 40, wealthy people begin valuing peace more than performance theater. And this is where most people get trapped. They think expensive means elevated. But wealthy people often discover the opposite. Many expensive things actually reduce quality of life. Now here's where this becomes uncomfortable. The third thing wealthy people stop spending money on is constant convenience. Food delivery every night, impulse online shopping. Paying to avoid every minor discomfort. At first, convenience feels like success. But over time, it slowly weakens discipline. And discipline is one of the highest return assets a person can own after 40. Because every time life becomes frictionless, people become softer financially, physically, and mentally. Wealthy people understand something most people ignore. Small repeated leaks become massive losses over decades. Which is why the next shift surprises a lot of people. They stop spending money on people who only appear during moments of success. This includes fake networking, transactional friendships, social circles built entirely around appearances, consumption, and status. After 40, wealthy people become brutally protective of energy. Because they've learned that some relationships are expensive without ever sending you a bill. Bad influences normalize bad habits. Competitive friends normalize overspending. Emotionally chaotic people normalize distraction, and distraction is expensive. In fact, many wealthy people eventually realize their biggest financial breakthroughs came after they reduced noise around their lives. But there's another expense that quietly destroys more futures than people realize. Wealthy people stop spending money trying to escape their lives every weekend. Constant entertainment, constant stimulation, constant dopamine. Because if someone constantly needs escape, something deeper is wrong. And after 40, intelligent people begin asking harder questions. Why do I feel exhausted all the time? Why do I need constant distraction to feel okay? That realization changes spending permanently. Instead of spending to escape stress, wealthy people start spending to reduce the sources of stress. And that single shift changes everything, which brings us to one of the most dangerous traps of all. Wealthy people also stop buying things simply because they're on sale. This sounds small, but psychologically, it's huge. Because discounts create emotional urgency. They make people feel smart while spending money they never intended to spend. And over time, saving money becomes a justification for accumulating useless things. Wealthy people understand, a bad purchase at 50% off is still a bad purchase. That's why after 40, many rich people become less impulsive, not more. They stop chasing cheap dopamine and start protecting long-term clarity. Now here's the strange irony. The older wealthy people get, the less interested they become in proving they're wealthy. That's why they also stop spending money on excessive upgrades. Not every new phone, not every trend, not every next level purchase society pushes every year. Eventually they realize, most upgrades create temporary excitement, but permanent expenses, and this next realization may be the hardest one of all. Wealthy people also stop spending money to compensate for emotional emptiness. That's the hidden layer underneath so much spending. Buying things after stressful weeks, rewarding themselves constantly, using consumption as emotional anesthesia. And the dangerous part is this: modern culture encourages emotional spending everywhere. Treat yourself, you deserve it, live a little. But wealthy people over 40 eventually recognize a painful truth. Many people are not buying joy, they're buying temporary relief. And temporary relief is one of the most expensive recurring payments in modern life. Now by this point, you may have noticed a pattern. None of these changes are really about becoming cheap, they're about becoming intentional. Which leads to the final thing wealthy people stop spending money on after 40, trying to look successful before they actually feel free. Because freedom becomes the real flex. Not attention, not applause, not image. Freedom to say no, freedom to rest, freedom to walk away from toxic environments. freedom to make decisions without panic, and wealthy people understand something most people only realize too late. Every financial decision is shaping a future version of yourself, either building flexibility or building invisible pressure. That's why many wealthy people after 40 don't necessarily spend less. They simply stop spending unconsciously, and once someone truly understands that difference, their entire relationship with money changes forever. But the deepest shift wealthy people make after 40 has almost nothing to do with money itself. It's identity, because eventually, truly successful people realize that most spending is emotional storytelling. People buy certain cars to feel respected, certain homes to feel secure, certain brands to feel valuable, styles to feel seen. And for years, they believe the next purchase will finally quiet something internal. But after 40, reality becomes harder to ignore. They've already experienced enough upgrades to notice the pattern. The excitement never lasts as long as they imagined. The new purchase fades, the emotional high disappears, and then the mind quietly searches for the next thing again. That's when the wealthiest people begin confronting a truth. Many spending habits are actually attempts to regulate emotion. Not financial decisions, emotional regulation. Stress spending, loneliness spending, status spending, boredom spending, exhaustion spending. And modern culture depends on people never realizing this. Because the moment someone emotionally detaches from compulsive consumption, they become far harder to manipulate. That's the real reason this topic matters. Not because wealthy people become minimalist monks after 40, but because they stop needing purchases to complete their identity. And that changes everything, because once a person no longer needs external proof of success, their financial decisions become dramatically more powerful. They stop reacting, they stop performing, they stop consuming emotionally. For the first time in their lives, money becomes a tool instead of emotional medication. And ironically, that's often the exact moment real wealth starts accelerating. Not because they discovered some secret investment strategy, but because they finally escaped the psychological loop designed to keep people consuming forever. Which means the ultimate difference between people who build lasting wealth and people who constantly struggle financially may not be intelligence at all. It may simply be this: one group uses money to build freedom, the other uses money to temporarily escape discomfort. And those two paths quietly create completely different lives over time. Maybe that's the real transition that happens after 40, not becoming richer, becoming harder to deceive, because at some point, people begin realizing the world profits from insecurity. It profits when people confuse attention with respect, luxury with fulfillment, consumption with progress. And the frightening part is how easy it is to spend decades chasing things that never truly belong to your deeper self in the first place. That's why many wealthy people become quieter over time. Not because life becomes empty, but because clarity replaces noise. They no longer feel the same urgency to impress strangers, to win invisible competitions, to constantly prove their worth through possessions. They finally understand something most people discover too late: a person can earn more every year and still feel emotionally poor. Because real wealth was never just about what you can buy, it was about how little controls you. And perhaps the ultimate financial freedom is reaching a point where your decisions are no longer driven by fear, comparison, loneliness, ego, or social pressure. Just intention, because in the end, the people who build the strongest lives are usually not the ones who own the most things. They're the ones who needed the fewest illusions. If this video changed the way you think about money, freedom, or success, take a second to like the video and subscribe to the channel Wealth Compass. Because here on Wealth Compass, we don't just talk about making more money. We talk about the psychology behind why some people build lasting freedom, while others stay trapped in invisible financial cycles for decades. And the next video may hit even closer to home. Because one of the strangest financial realities today is that millions of people are earning more money than ever before, yet still feel constantly stressed, financially pressured, and somehow behind. So in the next episode, we're diving into why high earners still feel broke. And once you understand the hidden psychological trap behind high-income lifestyles, you may never look at success the same way again. And maybe the most dangerous financial trap isn't low income at all. Maybe it's earning more and more money while silently building a life that still feels financially suffocating. Because some people don't stay broke because they earn too little. They stay broke because success itself became the trap. And that's exactly what we're uncovering in the next video.